Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The Unforeseen Encounter ***. In the sprawling, metallic city of Vira 5, beneath the amber glow of towering skytrees, a most unexpected event was unfolding. Major Jax Taylor, a seasoned combat officer from Earth, had just landed on the alien planet after a routine peacekeeping mission had gone awry. His shuttle, a sleek, silver craft, skidded to a halt in the dense, jungle-like forest outside the capital of the Virians, a species of towering, centaur-like beings who had, until recently, been hostile to human contact. The planet, Vira 5, was a world teeming with strange flora and fauna, its atmosphere heavy with a mixture of ozone and something sweeter, perhaps an alien flower that bloomed only in the twilight hours. But it wasn't the unfamiliar surroundings that made Jax pause as he disembarked. It was the figure standing near the clearing just outside the shuttle's hatches. A Virian. The being was, for lack of a better term, an enigma. Towering over Jax by at least 3 feet, it stood in the doorway of a narrow cave, partially shielded by ferns and other alien growths. Its form was lithe, almost sculptural, with long, muscular limbs that resembled both a humanoid and a horse, broad chest, smooth skin, and an elegant tail flicking behind. But it wasn't the creature's impressive physique that made Jax's heart skip. It was the striking eyes, deep violet, a color that seemed to glow even in the dim light of the forest. They were inquisitive, intelligent, and surprisingly vulnerable. She, as Jax would soon learn, was Vira, a representative of her people, although the term representative was about to be challenged. Human, she said in a tone that suggested both curiosity and confusion. Her voice, though rough from her alien throat, was melodic. Why did you remove my clothes? Do you like seeing me naked? Jax froze, half expecting the worst. After all, the Virians weren't known for their friendliness, let alone their understanding of human behavior. And this situation, this bizarre misunderstanding, was certainly not on the mission's checklist. Wait, what? Jax stammered, raising his arms in a gesture of peace. I didn't, what do you mean? Vira's eyes narrowed, scanning his body as though assessing his intentions, her posture defensive yet slightly inquisitive. She had already noticed the strange circumstances. Jax was standing before her wearing his standard military gear, but she was, well, not. Her body, though clearly designed for strength, was fully exposed to the elements. Long golden hair cascaded down her back, and her posture, though noble, made her seem oddly vulnerable. I woke up, she continued, and my clothing, gone. I found it removed, torn. Was this your doing, human? Do you not see me as I am? Jax's mind raced, searching for the right words. In truth, he had no idea what was going on. This wasn't part of any standard encounter protocol. His heart began to pound as the weight of the misunderstanding dawned on him. There was no clothing removal, but perhaps the Virians had a different way of seeing things. No, Jax said, quickly stepping forward, his hands raised in a calming manner. I didn't take anything. Your clothes? They were probably lost in the skirmish. Maybe they got caught in some debris during the crash. Vira tilted her head slightly, her eyes still suspicious. You did not intend to disrobe me then? Jax's face turned a shade of crimson. Of course not. I'm just trying to figure out what happened. A beat of silence followed, during which the wind rustled the leaves in the trees. Vira's eyes remained locked on his, searching for any sign of deception. In truth, Jax wasn't sure whether this was a cultural misunderstanding or some form of Virian humor that he wasn't prepared for. What he did know was that the situation was spiraling quickly, and his attempts to calm the alien woman only seemed to make her more suspicious. Then you do not wish to see me exposed? Vira asked, her gaze dropping downward as if assessing herself for the first time. Jax blinked, taken aback by the question. No. Of course not, he spluttered, hands still raised. I'm not. I didn't. Vira snorted, a sound that caught him off guard. It was a strange, almost dismissive noise, yet it was not filled with malice. The Virian seemed almost amused. You are funny, human, she said, now showing a hint of a smile. I have heard stories of your kind. Some of you are known to be curious, very curious, but you are not the ones who take without reason, are you? Jax relaxed slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing. No. Humans aren't like that. We don't steal clothes, or anything without cause. And honestly, I'm just as confused as you are right now. We got into a fight with some hostile forces before the crash. Maybe your clothes got damaged in the process. Vira's smile faded as she processed his words. Her expression shifted from amusement to something more serious, thoughtful even. The violet eyes seemed to grow more contemplative. Damaged, she repeated. Then you would be the ones responsible for my state. Jax frowned, uncertain where she was heading. Well, if that's what you're asking. I suppose in a way yes No? Vira cut him off, her tone firm though not angry. You did not take my clothes. You were simply part of the chaos that led to their loss. I understand. Jax exhaled in relief, feeling the weight of the situation lighten. But Vira wasn't done. With a soft grunt, she looked down at herself again, then back at Jax. If I am to accept this misunderstanding, then I must also ask you, human, do you not fear my nakedness? She seemed to genuinely seek an answer. Jax, trying his best to stay composed, met her eyes. Honestly, I'm more concerned about making sure we get out of here alive than about what you're wearing, but no, I'm not uncomfortable. Vira blinked as though processing his response. Then a curious glint sparkled in her eyes. Very well, she said, a sly grin tugging at the corner of her lips. Perhaps there is more to your kind than I first thought. The cost of trust. The moment hung in the air like a strange melody, a connection forged through misunderstanding. Jax still didn't fully understand Vira's strange combination of curiosity, vulnerability, and strength, but he could sense that the situation was far from resolved. Her words echoed in his mind, do you not fear my nakedness? The question had felt strange, but Jax knew better than to underestimate the complexity of alien customs. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to build a bridge between two very different species. Listen, Jax said, rubbing the back of his neck nervously, I'm really not sure what's going on here, but if we're going to get out of this, I could use your help. We're both stuck in the middle of an alien forest. You're probably aware that we're not exactly on friendly terms with your people, right? Vira's posture shifted. She stood straighter, her powerful frame seeming even more imposing as she looked down at him. Her long, elegant tail flicked behind her, and the dark violet hue of her eyes gleamed in the dim light. It was clear she had been trained for war just as he had. Yet, something about her was different. Something about this Virian suggested she was not entirely the warrior Jax had anticipated meeting. You speak of your people, Vira said, her voice now sharp, but you think of us as enemies. Why? Jax sighed, sensing the conversation shifting again. Look, we don't want to fight. It's just, we've had a rough history with your kind. A lot of misunderstandings. And with the conflict, tensions ran high. Our military, your military, it's all been too much. But that's why I need your help. The Virians and humans need to start working together, not against each other. We can't keep doing this. Vira considered his words carefully. Her head tilted, like a predator assessing its prey. It was clear she wasn't dismissing his words, but she wasn't agreeing either. Working together, she repeated as though tasting the idea. You are brave to ask for such things, human. But the cost of trust is great. You speak of peace, yet my people have suffered because of yours. Can you prove that your intentions are genuine? Jax felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't a simple request, it was a test. A test he had to pass. And if he failed, this alien world could become his grave. I don't expect you to trust me just like that, Jax said, his voice firm. But we can start small. I'm asking you to work with me, just as allies just for now. That way we can figure out the next steps, all right? Vira's eyes never left him. Her gaze seemed to pierce right through him as though she could read his every thought. She wasn't fooled by his human optimism, but something about his sincerity made her pause. She had seen many humans come and go, but none quite like this one. I will consider your words, Vira said, her voice softening ever so slightly. But do not mistake my acceptance for trust, human. I still do not know you. Jack swallowed. He knew he had to prove himself. He had to show that he wasn't just another soldier looking to conquer. Fair enough, Jax replied, holding her gaze. So, where do we start? Vira stepped back, her posture shifting to one of contemplation. The air around them hummed with the energy of the unknown. The distant hum of creatures echoed from deep within the forest, a constant reminder of the strange new world around them. We will begin by addressing our immediate concerns, Vira said, finally breaking the silence. There is danger in these woods, more than you realize. And I will not have you stumbling about like a blind animal. You may be human, but I will not allow you to die because of your ignorance. Jax nodded, feeling a surge of both relief and unease. I'm all for survival. What's the plan? Vira motioned for him to follow her, and they moved deeper into the forest. The trees around them seemed to shift as they walked, their dark, twisting limbs arching over their heads like the fingers of some ancient deity. The forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. Your shuttle was damaged. You cannot stay here long, Vira said, her tone businesslike. We must reach the caverns. There we may find shelter and resources. But you must be careful. The ground is treacherous. We are not alone here. Yeah, I noticed, Jax muttered, glancing over his shoulder. He had caught glimpses of strange humanoid figures darting through the trees, watching them from the shadows. You fear the shadows? Vira asked, her voice almost amused. No, Jax replied, shaking his head. I don't fear what I can see. It's the stuff I can't see that makes me nervous. Vira's laugh was low and melodic, almost comforting. It was a strange thing to hear coming from a creature who could likely snap his neck in a single motion. Still, there was a warmth to it, a sense that she, too, was trying to make sense of their strange alliance. You are wiser than I thought, human, she said as they trudged through the underbrush. But there is more you must understand. The Virians are a proud race. We are not easily swayed by words alone. You may be asking for peace, but peace is a currency few can afford. Jax paused, absorbing her words. He understood better than anyone the weight of diplomacy, but it wasn't just diplomacy at stake here. It was the very future of both their species. I don't expect peace to come without a price, he said slowly as they continued their trek. But we're running out of time. My people will retaliate if we don't make progress here. And so will yours. We'll both lose everything we've worked for. Vira stopped, turning to face him. Her eyes were intense now, narrowed and piercing. You are not wrong, she said. But peace, real peace, is not something you can simply demand. It must be earned. And if you truly wish to earn my trust, you will have to prove it in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Jack swallowed hard. There was no sugarcoating it. This was a gamble, one that he wasn't sure he was ready to make. But he didn't have a choice. The stakes had never been higher. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, his voice firm, though a slight tremor of uncertainty lingered. Vira studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good. Because the first step in earning my trust is this. You must survive what lies ahead. The forest is not the only danger we face. The Virian factions are divided, and there are those who will stop at nothing to prevent peace. You and I are in this together, whether we like it or not. Jax nodded, feeling the weight of the task ahead settle on his shoulders. His mission had just become far more complicated than he'd ever anticipated. But if there was any hope for humanity and Virians to coexist, it would begin here, in the heart of this strange alien world. The cavern's secrets. The further Jax and Vira moved through the dense forest, the more the atmosphere seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, almost palpable, as though it were thick with unseen eyes. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig seemed to carry an eerie weight, a sense of foreboding. The tall trees that once towered over them now seemed to bend inward, closing in like walls in a maze. The violet glow from Vira's eyes cast strange reflections on the alien flora around them, turning the landscape into a dreamscape, a mix of beauty and danger. Vira moved with quiet grace, her large, powerful frame flowing through the forest with the ease of a predator. Her tail flicked behind her, her body instinctively scanning the environment for any threats, while Jax did his best to keep up, his military training keeping him alert. He had faced hostile environments before, alien jungles, battlefields, and ancient ruins, but this was something different. Something deeper. Keep up, human, Vira called softly, her voice almost a whisper despite the commanding tone. The dangers of this place are not always visible. Jax grunted in acknowledgement, pushing through a thick patch of ferns as he followed her. Despite the tension of the situation, there was something about Vira's presence that kept him focused. She was a creature of both strength and wisdom, and even though they had only just met, Jax couldn't help but feel that her alliance was not something to be taken lightly. Her skill in navigating the dangerous terrain of Vira 5 was beyond impressive, and as much as it pained him to admit, Jax was grateful for her knowledge. After what felt like hours of trekking through the dense forest, they finally reached the entrance to the caverns. The ground beneath them became rocky, and the trees opened up to reveal a massive, jagged cliff face, with a narrow passageway leading downward into the earth. A chill swept through the air as they approached. This is where we seek refuge, Vira said, glancing at Jax with a slight nod. Her expression, though focused, softened a little as she led him into the cavern's mouth. Jax had to squint as they entered the dimly lit tunnel, his eyes still adjusting to the gloom. The walls of the cavern were smooth, almost too perfect, as if carved by a force far beyond anything human technology had ever encountered. Strange, bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting eerie greenish hues over the rock formations. The air was thick with an ancient, musky scent, one that hinted at something far older than any civilization he'd ever known. "Stay close," Vira warned, her voice a low hum now, careful not to disturb the silence. "The caverns are old. Dangerous. Not everything down here is friendly." Jax nodded, his pulse quickening. He had no idea what lay ahead. But he wasn't about to show fear, not in front of Vira, not when she was depending on him as much as he was depending on her. They descended deeper, the passageway narrowing at times until they had to crouch low to avoid hitting their heads on the jagged ceiling. Every footstep echoed, and the further they went, the more oppressive the silence became. It was the kind of silence that made every sound feel amplified, the kind of quiet that put the hair on the back of Jax's neck on edge. Vira didn't break the silence, but Jax could sense her growing tension. Her eyes scanned the shadows, her tail swaying back and forth like a pendulum, every movement deliberate and controlled. The further they descended, the more Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. He could hear faint noises, almost like whispers, echoing off the walls. The chill in the air thickened as they passed deeper into the belly of the cavern. "What is this place?" Jax asked in a low voice, trying to keep his tone steady despite the unease creeping up his spine. Vira paused, her violet eyes glinting in the dim light. "These caverns are a place of both history and death. The Virians have lived here for centuries. Before the war, before the Great Migration to the surface. These caves were our sanctuary. But not all is as it seems." Jax didn't need to ask what she meant. He had seen enough of Virian history and their battles for survival. War as always left scars, both on the land and the people who had once called it home. "Who else lives here?" Jax asked cautiously, trying to peer into the shadows. Vira didn't respond immediately. Instead, she motioned for him to follow her, leading him down a series of twisting tunnels. They passed ancient carvings on the walls, crude but strangely beautiful depictions of Virians and their battles, their culture, their way of life before the planet's many factions split into warring tribes. Jax couldn't help but feel a deep sense of awe as they passed the carvings, each one telling a story of survival, pride, and unity. "The other factions," Vira finally answered, her voice quiet. "They seek to control these caverns. There are ancient relics down here, artifacts from the Virians' earliest days. Weapons, knowledge, power." Jax's pulse quickened. If there were ancient weapons hidden beneath the surface of this world, then it was no wonder the Virians were so protective of the caverns. And no wonder they weren't eager to trust the humans. If the wrong hands got hold of those relics, it could be the spark that reignites the war between their two species. "What kind of power?" Jax asked, his voice tense. Vira turned her head, her violet eyes glimmering with an emotion Jax couldn't quite place. "The kind that could change the course of history." They continued walking in silence, the air growing colder with each step. It was clear that Vira was holding something back, but Jax didn't push her. He had his own suspicions about what she meant. Ancient weapons, forgotten technology, he had seen it before. The risks were high, and if they weren't careful, they could very well find themselves caught in the crossfire of Virian factions who saw the caverns as nothing more than a battleground. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of winding through the maze of tunnels, they reached a large chamber. The ceiling arched high above them, and in the center stood an ancient altar-like structure, crafted from smooth black stone. Carvings ran along its edges, and a faint glow emanated from the center. It was both beautiful and unsettling, like a relic of a time long past. Vira stopped in front of it, her posture shifting from alert to reverent. She stood silently for a moment, eyes locked on the altar, as if communing with the ancient forces that had once thrived here. Jax, sensing the gravity of the moment, approached carefully. "What is this place?" he asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Vira's gaze flicked to him, and for a moment, he thought he saw something softer in her expression. She stepped closer to the altar and placed her hand on its surface, her fingers brushing the carvings. "This is the heart of the Virian people," she said softly. "Where our ancestors first found the strength to rise. It is not only a place of power, it is a place of sacrifice." Jax felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something ancient and profound about this place. The air around them felt charged with energy, as if the very walls were alive with the weight of history. "It's beautiful," Jax whispered. Vira nodded slowly, her voice barely audible. "Yes, but beauty has a price. The price of trust. The price of peace. You will understand, human, when the time comes." Jax swallowed, feeling the enormity of their journey pressing in on him. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the future of two worlds, two species, and the cost of that future was becoming clearer with each passing moment. The price of power. The silence in the cavern was profound, the kind of quiet that seemed to settle into the bones, as though the very earth itself was holding its breath. Jax could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears, and the soft rustling of Vira's movements beside him. Her presence was commanding, yet in this sacred place she seemed smaller, humbled by the power that radiated from the ancient altar before them. Jax couldn't help but feel a deep unease settling in his stomach. There was something more to this place, something beyond the relics and artifacts he had been expecting. Vira stepped away from the altar, her fingers lingering on the cold stone before she turned to face Jax. The shadows in her violet eyes seemed darker now, as if the weight of the cavern's history had seeped into her very being. "Do you understand now?" she asked, her voice low and steady. Jax swallowed, his throat dry. "Not completely," he admitted. "But I can sense that this place holds more than just old artifacts. This is where the Virians found their strength. But strength always comes with a price, doesn't it?" Vira's eyes flashed. "Yes. It is the way of all things. Power cannot exist without sacrifice. And the power in this place, it is not something to be taken lightly." Jax stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the altar as if the stone itself were calling out to him. His fingers tingled with the same strange energy that seemed to pulse from the very heart of the cavern. He had seen power like this before, ancient civilizations, long-extinct races, all of them with technology or magic that could alter the course of history. And he had seen the destruction that such power could bring. "What happens if someone tries to use it?" Jax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He knew that Vira had been hinting at the dangers, but he needed to hear it from her. He needed to understand. Vira's expression softened, but only just. "If someone with the wrong intentions taps into the power here, it will consume them. This place is a crucible. It tests those who seek to wield its strength. Only those who are pure of heart, or willing to sacrifice everything, can claim its gifts." Jax frowned. The last part of her sentence sent a chill down his spine. Sacrifice everything. He had seen too many soldiers, too many leaders, sacrifice too much in the name of victory and power. He knew the price of ambition, and it wasn't always paid by the one who sought the power. "And what if I wanted to use it?" Jax asked, not sure whether the words were reckless or simply a test. Vira's gaze hardened. You are no different than any other human. You seek peace, yet you cling to your weapons. To your pride. This place does not care for intentions. It cares only for the heart of the one who seeks it." Jax's jaw tightened. He had never considered himself a man of pure motives, but he had never been one to let power corrupt him either. Still, Vira's warning hung heavy in the air. There was something dark beneath the surface of this place, a force that didn't belong to either the Virians or the humans. Vira took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost its hardness. "I know why you came here, human. I know why you seek peace. But understand this, peace is not something that can be brokered by simple words or treaties. If you are to bring true peace to your people, you must be willing to sacrifice more than you can imagine." Jax turned toward her, meeting her gaze head-on. "I understand. But that's why I'm here with you, isn't it? Because I'm willing to pay that price." Vira said nothing for a long moment. Instead, she turned away from him, her tail flicking nervously behind her as she walked deeper into the cavern. Jax followed her without question, the oppressive weight of the situation pressing in on him. As they moved further into the heart of the cavern, the walls began to shift. The smooth, polished rock began to roughen, jagged edges and crumbling stones scattered around them. The bioluminescent fungi that had once bathed the passageways in soft, green light now seemed to pulse with a dim red hue, casting everything in an ominous glow. The very air around them seemed to thrum with energy, and Jax couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. "It's not just the factions we need to worry about," Vira said, her voice carrying a note of unease that Jax hadn't heard before. "There are other forces in this world. Forces that are beyond even our understanding. Those who have no interest in peace, only in power." Jax's instincts flared. This wasn't just about the Virians and the humans anymore. They were treading on something much older, much more dangerous. The caverns, the ancient relics, and the power contained within them, it was more than just a conflict between two species. It was a battle for control over something that could reshape the galaxy itself. As they reached the heart of the cavern, the source of the strange power became clear. A massive, glowing crystal stood in the center of the chamber, suspended in mid-air by an invisible force. It pulsed with an ethereal light, casting sharp shadows across the stone walls. The air hummed with energy and Jax felt a pull toward it, an almost magnetic attraction that made his pulse race. "This is the heart of Vyra," Vyra said, her voice reverent and fearful. "The source of our people's strength. It is said that whoever can master its power will have the ability to shape the future of all who live here." Jax approached it cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for the crystal. But Vyra's voice stopped him. "Do not touch it," she warned, her tone laced with fear. "Not unless you are prepared to pay the price. Only the worthy can claim its power. And even then, it will not be easy. It is not simply a gift, it is a curse." Jax's hand hovered just above the glowing surface. He could feel the energy crackling in the air, the promise of untold power. But Vyra's warning lingered in his mind. There was something dangerous about this. Something that felt wrong even though the crystal seemed to beckon him. "What is the price?" Jax asked, his voice tense. Vyra hesitated before answering. "It is a test. A trial of your soul. The heart will take from you what you value most, and if you are not strong enough to accept the loss, it will consume you. Many have tried to wield its power and failed. Some have never returned." Jax's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of her words sank in. This was not just a war for survival anymore. It was a war for the future of both their peoples, and the forces they were dealing with were far beyond anything either the Virians or the humans had ever faced. "Do you think I'm ready?" Jax asked, not entirely sure whether he was asking Vyra or himself. Vyra's eyes softened as she studied him. "I do not know, human. But I will not stand in your way. If you seek peace, you must first face the heart. And whatever you find there, whatever price you must pay, you will carry it for the rest of your days." Jax stepped closer to the crystal, the energy around it surging, almost as if it were waiting for him. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was the moment of truth. Peace, power, and sacrifice. It was all in his hands now. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the surface of the glowing crystal. The price of truth. The moment Jax's fingers made contact with the crystal, a surge of energy rushed through him, as though the very core of the cavern had come alive. The air around him crackled with raw, untamed power. The ground beneath his feet vibrated, sending tremors up his legs, and his vision blurred as he was pulled into a vortex of light and shadow. He tried to pull back, but the force was too strong. He was trapped in the crystal's pull. His mind raced, the overwhelming sensation of being caught between realms pushing him to the brink of panic. His heartbeat thudded in his chest and he gasped for air, but none came. It was as though he were drowning in the very energy that surrounded him. Vyra's voice cut through the chaos, but it felt distant, muffled as if coming from the other side of a thick, invisible wall. "Jax, you must let go. Do not fight it." But how could he let go? How could he surrender to a power that felt like it could tear him apart? He was in no way prepared for this, no matter how many battles he'd fought or how many wars he'd seen. This was something different. Something ancient. Something that transcended any earthly concept of power. He felt the pull of the heart of Vyra grow stronger. His vision finally began to clear, and he found himself standing in a vast, endless void. The ground beneath his feet was nothing but shifting mist, and the space around him was consumed by swirling darkness and light, an ever-changing horizon that defied any sense of direction. His head spun, disoriented by the unnatural, dreamlike world that surrounded him. He couldn't tell if this was real or just a manifestation of the heart's power. Then, a figure appeared before him, materializing out of the swirling mist. It was Vyra, but not the Vyra he knew. This version of her was ethereal, glowing with a radiant light. Her violet eyes glimmered with the same intensity, but there was something different about her. Her expression was both serene and grave. "Welcome, Jax," her voice echoed in the vast emptiness, though it seemed to come from every direction at once. "You have entered the heart's trial. What you seek, what you are willing to sacrifice, will determine what you become." Jax's mouth went dry. "What is this? What's happening?" Vyra, or the manifestation of her, smiled softly. "You seek peace, but peace is never free. Not for your people. Not for mine. The heart will show you the truth of what you have been willing to sacrifice to achieve your goals. And in that truth you will face your own soul." Jax's heart pounded as the weight of her words sank in. He had come seeking peace. He had been ready to fight for it, to risk everything. But was he truly ready to face the cost? Was he prepared to lose something vital, something irreplaceable? "I don't understand," he whispered. "What do I have to do?" "The truth is not always what you expect," Vyra said, her voice now a soft murmur, like a whisper carried on the wind. "The heart will show you your past, your fears, and your desires. You must face them. Only then can you claim its power. But beware, Jax. The heart will test you in ways you cannot predict. It will show you things you may not wish to see. Jax took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. He had come this far, he couldn't stop. He would face whatever the heart had to show him. For peace. For humanity. For the future. Vira's form flickered, and the swirling void around him began to shift once again. The ground beneath his feet solidified, forming into a rocky terrain, a desolate battlefield, scorched and scarred. The air was thick with the stench of smoke, and the sky overhead was blood-red. The echoes of distant screams, the sounds of weapons clashing, filled the air. Jax's heart sank. This was a memory. His memory. He recognized the scene instantly. This was the battlefield on Rygarth III, where he had led a unit of soldiers in a desperate assault against the alien forces that had taken the planet. He had watched as his comrades fell, one by one, their lives extinguished in a storm of gunfire and explosions. It was the battle that had haunted his dreams, the one that had been seared into his mind ever since. No, he whispered, taking a step back, but the scene wouldn't fade. It only grew stronger. The chaos, the violence, the loss. His hands trembled as the memory enveloped him. He could see their faces, hear their voices, feel the weight of their deaths crushing him once more. You were their leader, Vira's voice echoed from behind him, though the figure of her was nowhere to be seen. You sent them to their deaths. For what? For the glory of war? For the sake of your people? Jax clenched his fists. I didn't want this, he muttered. I did what I had to do. But the words rang hollow. In this place, in the heart of the trial, the truth was undeniable. He had chosen the path of violence. He had chosen the mission. He had sent those men to die. Even now he could still hear their screams. And he could feel the guilt gnawing at him, eating him from the inside. Peace, Vira's voice whispered again. Is it worth the cost of bloodshed? Is it worth the lives of those who trusted you? Jax dropped to his knees in the vision, the weight of the question pressing down on him. Was it worth it? Could peace truly be achieved through war? Was there another way? The scene around him shifted, the battlefield dissolving into mist, and another vision formed before his eyes. This time it was not the past but the future. A vision of Earth, his home. He saw cities in ruins, streets filled with smoke and flames, the people of his world locked in chaos. In the distance he could see soldiers, his soldiers, marching into battle, but this time there was no leader. There was no plan. There was only devastation. No, Jax gasped, his heart clenching in his chest. This can't be. The vision grew clearer, the destruction even more vivid. He saw the people he had fought to protect, his family, his friends, all of them lost in the flames of war. He saw the death toll rise higher and higher, and his own face reflected back at him in the ruins. He was not the hero of this vision. He was the architect of its destruction. You see now, Vira's voice whispered, filled with sorrow. You cannot escape the consequences of your choices. The power you seek, will it be worth the lives that will be lost? Will you sacrifice your own soul to achieve peace? Jax stumbled backward, clutching his head. The weight of the truth crushed him. He had been willing to sacrifice everything for peace, but had he truly understood what that meant? Was peace worth the destruction it would cost? Could he be the one to bring balance, or was he simply doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past? The vision faded again, and Jax found himself standing in the cavern once more, his fingers still touching the surface of the heart of Vira. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his heart still pounded in his chest. The trial was over, but the questions remained. Vira's ethereal figure stood before him, her expression unreadable. Do you understand now, Jax? She asked, her voice softer than before. The price of peace is never simple. It requires a sacrifice. And you must decide if you are willing to pay it. Jax stood in silence for a long moment, his mind reeling. The choice he faced was impossible. The power to change everything lay within his grasp, but the cost, it was a cost he could never fully know until he made his decision. Finally he looked at Vira, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. I understand. But I will not walk away from this. If peace requires sacrifice, then I will make it. I'll find another way. Vira's eyes softened slightly. You may yet find the path you seek, human. But remember this, peace is not a destination. It is a journey. And every journey leaves a mark. The burden of peace. Jax's fingers trembled as he pulled them away from the glowing crystal, the power still humming in the air around him. The cavern had returned to its stillness, the echoes of his visions fading like a dream upon waking. He was shaken, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The weight of the trial had settled into him, and for the first time, he wondered if he was truly ready for what lay ahead. Vira stood silently before him, watching his every move with a mix of curiosity and caution. Her violet eyes bore into him, as if searching for some sign of change, some hint of what had transpired within the trial. But Jax wasn't sure what had changed. The images, the questions, those truths they revealed about war, about peace, and about sacrifice, clung to him, demanding his attention. "What now?" he asked, his voice hoarse, his throat still tight from the emotional strain. "What do I do with this power?" Vira's expression was unreadable. She took a step closer, her lithe form moving through the cavern with practiced grace. "Now you must decide. You've seen the consequences. You've faced the darkness of your past and you've glimpsed the weight of the future. The power you seek. I know the price," Jax cut in, his voice stronger now. "But I can't turn away from it. Not now." Vira's eyes softened slightly, but there was a trace of something else behind them. Something darker, perhaps sympathy or sorrow. Not everyone is willing to pay the price. Many who come to the heart of Vira leave with empty hands, their hearts shattered. You've seen the destruction in your visions. The consequences of your choices will ripple through both your people and mine. Jax's jaw clenched. The images of Earth's ruined cities and the cries of his fallen comrades still haunted him. But he could not abandon his people now, not when they were so close to the brink of war. The fragile peace that hung between the Virians and the humans had to be secured. For all the devastation he had witnessed, he still believed peace was worth fighting for. "I understand that," Jax said. "But I have to try. I can't stand by while both our peoples destroy each other." Vira regarded him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing as if considering something unknown to him. Finally she spoke. "You are certain you are prepared to lead them, then? You must understand that what you seek cannot be done with the heart of a soldier alone. You will need more than power, more than the willingness to sacrifice. You will need wisdom. And even then, the heart will not simply give its power to anyone who asks." Jax nodded, though inside, a quiet voice of doubt gnawed at him. Wisdom. That had never been his strength. He was a soldier, a leader, yes, but a soldier first. But for the first time in his life, he realized that peace would demand something from him he wasn't sure he could provide. Wisdom, compassion, the ability to think beyond immediate goals. And if he failed in that, if he failed to lead his people with more than just strength, would the war he sought to prevent only become inevitable? "Then I will find a way to make them listen," he said, determination in his voice. Vira's gaze hardened as she stepped back from him, her tail flicking in irritation. Making them listen is one thing. Keeping them from tearing each other apart once they understand the cost of what they've done is something else entirely. There are forces at work beyond the Virians and the humans. And if you choose to use the heart's power, you will make enemies who will stop at nothing to take it from you. Jax narrowed his eyes. "Enemies?" "Yes. There are others who covet the power of the heart," Vira said. "Factions, ancient beings, even empires beyond the stars who seek to use it for their own ends. And they will not care about your reasons or your desire for peace. They will only care about what you can give them. What they can take." A shiver ran through Jax. He had known that the war with the Virians wasn't the only threat his people faced, but he had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that if he could broker peace between the two species, it might set an example for the galaxy. But Vira's words brought the harsh reality back into focus. The battle for peace might not be the one he had been preparing for. "Then I'll protect it," Jax said, his voice steady despite the cold unease that had settled in his stomach. "I'll protect whatever I need to. I'm not going to let others destroy what we've worked for." Vira's eyes darkened. "You underestimate the forces you're dealing with, human. These enemies are not so easily outmatched. They are ancient and they have no interest in peace. They will do anything to claim the heart of Vira for themselves. And they will use you, manipulate you until you've served your purpose, and then they will cast you aside." Jax's mind raced as the enormity of the situation sunk in. He had thought he could find a way to forge peace with the Virians, perhaps broker a fragile truce. But this was something much larger, more dangerous. The heart of Vira wasn't just a tool for peace. It was a weapon, a source of unimaginable power, and others would stop at nothing to claim it for their own. What had he gotten himself into? "You're telling me," Jax said, his voice quiet but firm, "that if I choose to wield this power, I'm going to have to fight more than just the Virians?" Vira nodded, her expression dark. "Yes. You will have to fight against forces that have been manipulating events for millennia. You will have to face enemies you cannot even begin to comprehend." Jax stood silently for a moment, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The path ahead had never been clearer, Yet at the same time, it had never seemed more impossible. But he couldn't afford to hesitate. He couldn't afford to doubt himself. Too much was at stake. "If I fight," he said, his voice hardening with resolve, "then I'll make sure I fight for something worth fighting for. For both our peoples. I don't care what forces stand against me. I will find a way." Vira studied him for a long time before speaking. "You have the heart of a warrior, Jax. But remember this, peace is not won on the battlefield. It is forged in the hearts and minds of those who choose it. And if you choose to wield the heart of Vira, you will carry its burden forever. It will not give you an easy victory. It will not give you the answers you seek. It will only amplify your desires, your fears, and your ambitions." Jax exhaled slowly. "I understand. And I'm ready." For a brief moment, Vira's gaze softened, as though she were seeing him for the first time. Then, without another word, she turned and began walking toward the altar once more. "Then follow me," she said. "If you are truly ready to claim the power of the heart, you will need to prove yourself worthy. The trial may be over, but the war for your soul has only just begun." Jax followed her, his mind focused, his heart heavy with the weight of his choice. He was ready to face whatever came next. For peace. For the future. For the people who depended on him. The final choice. The cavern shimmered as Jax followed Vira toward the heart of Vira, the crystal pulsing with a slow rhythmic glow that seemed to beckon him closer. The air grew thicker, charged with the same energy that had enveloped him during his trial. It was as if the very walls of the cavern were watching, waiting for him to make his final decision. Vira had not said another word since their exchange. She walked ahead with a quiet intensity, the silence between them pressing down on Jax like the weight of the universe itself. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, the magnitude of what was about to happen weighing on him. The power to reshape the future was within his grasp, but the path ahead was unclear. Would he truly be able to use it for peace, or would he become just another pawn in a game too large for him to control? "Why me?" Jax finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice was low, tinged with a mixture of frustration and curiosity. "Why choose a human for this? Why the heart of Vira?" Vira slowed her pace but didn't turn to face him. Her voice, when it came, was almost a whisper, like a secret shared between them. "The heart does not choose its bearer, Jax. It is chosen by destiny. You are the one who found it. You are the one who has been tested by its trials. The heart will give you what you seek, but only if you prove worthy. That is why I've brought you here. You asked for peace, but peace requires more than strength. It requires understanding. It requires sacrifice." "Sacrifice," Jax repeated. The word echoed in the vast chamber, carrying a weight that was both familiar and foreign. His mind drifted to the faces of his fallen comrades, the people he had watched die in the name of peace. He had already given so much. Was he truly ready to give more? "Yes," Vira continued, her voice carrying a note of finality. "Sacrifice is the price of peace. But there are different kinds of sacrifice. The kind that comes with blood. The kind that comes with loss. And the kind that comes with choices that change the course of history." They reached the altar. The heart of Vira loomed before them, its surface now glowing with an intense radiance. Jax felt the energy in the air surge, pulsing through his skin, making his hair stand on end. He could feel it now, the power calling to him, offering him everything he had ever wanted. The chance to end the war. The chance to reshape the future. The chance to secure peace, for both his people and the Virians. He stood before the heart, feeling the weight of his decision pressing against him. His mind raced with the possibilities, the implications of what this power could bring. He could feel the vision of Earth, of the ruined cities, haunting him. Could he truly bring peace without more destruction? Could he use this power without becoming the very thing he feared? "You must choose now," Vira's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp and clear. "Will you claim the power of the heart, or will you walk away?" Jax swallowed hard, stepping closer to the crystal. He could feel the heart's pulse in his bones, could hear the faint whispers of distant voices carried on the air. His fingers twitched, instinctively reaching for it, but then he paused. What if Vira was right? What if this was too much for him? He had always believed that strength was the answer, that if he fought hard enough he could protect his people. But was that truly the right path? Was the destruction of the Virians and possibly his own people really worth the cost of peace? He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I can't be what they want me to be," he muttered to himself. "I can't be just a soldier anymore." Vira's eyes softened, but there was still a trace of something harsh in her gaze. "You are more than a soldier, Jax. You are a leader. And that is why you must make this choice. To wield the heart of Vira is to carry the weight of both your people's future and the Virians. It will not be easy. It will not be simple. And it may break you. Jax looked at her then, truly looked at her, and for the first time he saw the ancient weight of her own knowledge. Vira had lived centuries, seen wars rise and fall, civilizations born and destroyed. She had witnessed the cost of peace, and she knew what it took to hold the future in one's hands. Do you believe peace is possible? Jax asked, the question heavy on his tongue. Vira's lips parted, and for a long moment she said nothing. Her eyes seemed to reflect 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 lives before she finally spoke. I believe peace is a fleeting dream. But I also believe that it is worth fighting for. Even when it seems impossible. Even when it seems like the cost is too great. It is worth the sacrifice. It is worth the fight. Jax's heart thundered in his chest. This was it, the moment where everything would change. His entire life had led him here. The weight of the decision was almost too much to bear. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the heart. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, raw, untamed, and powerful. The cavern shook, the walls trembling with the force of the heart's awakening. The crystal pulsed faster, the light intensifying until it consumed everything around them. Jax's body hummed with the energy, and his vision blurred as he was overwhelmed with visions. Visions of his people, the Virians, the war, the galaxy. He saw the endless cycle of violence and hate, the loss, the destruction. And in the midst of it he saw something else. Something he hadn't expected. He saw himself. But not as the soldier, not as the leader. He saw himself as the man who had the power to change it all. He saw the cost of his choices, how each decision, each action rippled across the universe, affecting lives, destinies, and futures in ways he couldn't even begin to comprehend. The visions faded, and Jax found himself standing before the heart, his hands still pressed against its surface. He could feel the weight of it, of everything it represented, coursing through him. The power was his, but so was the responsibility. You have chosen, Vira said, her voice calm yet filled with an undeniable weight. You will carry the heart's power. But know this is not the end. It is only the beginning. You must learn to wield it, and you must learn to carry the burden of peace. Jax nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He had chosen. He had made the decision. There was no going back now. I will protect my people, he said, his voice firm. I will protect the Virians. And I will fight for peace, no matter the cost. Vira's eyes softened. Then you are truly ready, Jax. The heart will guide you. But remember, the path you walk is not one of glory. It is a path of sacrifice, of choices, and of consequences. The future is not guaranteed. The weight of peace. Jax stood before the heart of Vira, his hand still resting upon its glowing surface. The light of the crystal swirled around him, filling the cavern with an eerie radiance. The weight of the decision he had made pressed heavily on his shoulders. He could feel the power coursing through him, settling deep into his bones, but with it came a quiet understanding. The future he now carried was no longer his own. The galaxy, the war, the fate of both humans and Virians, all rested on his next steps. Vira watched him, her violet eyes unreadable, but her tail flicking slowly, betraying a trace of uncertainty. The ancient Virian seemed to be waiting for something, perhaps for Jax to prove that he truly understood the path he had chosen. You must know this, Jax, Vira said softly, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. The power of the heart will not give you the answers you seek. It amplifies what lies within you, your desires, your fears, your weaknesses. It will not create peace. It will reveal the cost of peace, and it will force you to confront the deepest corners of your soul. Are you prepared for that? Jax didn't hesitate. I'm prepared. I have to be. She nodded, the faintest hint of approval in her expression before stepping back. Then let us begin. With a sudden motion, Vira reached out and placed her hand on the heart. The light intensified, wrapping around her like a storm. Jax felt a jolt of energy surge through him, and in an instant the cavern around them blurred, the world folding and shifting as though reality itself were unraveling. He found himself standing in the center of a battlefield. The air was thick with smoke, the ground scorched, littered with the remnants of fallen soldiers. The sounds of conflict, screams, explosions, the clash of weapons, echoed in his ears, but all he could focus on was the figure before him. A soldier, a man who looked like Jax but older, weathered, his face scarred by years of war. His uniform was torn, his armor battered, but his eyes were filled with a cold determination. Jax. The soldier's voice was hollow, tired. This is the future you've created. This is the cost of peace. Jax stepped forward, his heart heavy in his chest. What do you mean? The soldier's lips curled into a grim smile. You wanted peace, didn't you? You thought you could end the war, broker an alliance, and save both our peoples. But look at what you've wrought. Look at what the heart demands. The scene around them shifted again, and suddenly Jax was standing in the midst of a ruined city. The skyline of a once thriving metropolis was now nothing more than a crumbled skeleton of shattered buildings, twisted metal, and broken glass. Smoke billowed from what had once been the heart of the city, and the cries of civilians filled the air. He turned to look at the figure beside him. It was Vira, but she too was scarred, her expression one of sorrow and regret. This is the cost of your choice, Jax, she said, her voice mournful. You have wielded the heart's power, and now the balance has shifted. The Virians, your people, and the galaxy itself will never be the same. You cannot undo what has been done. Jax's mind raced, his thoughts a blur. The weight of these visions, the destruction, the loss, the anguish, felt suffocating. He had wanted to protect his people, to stop the war, to bring peace. But in doing so, had he only set in motion a greater catastrophe? Is this what the heart gives? He asked, his voice shaking. Is this the price of peace? Vira's eyes were filled with sadness as she looked at him. It is the price of everything. The heart does not offer easy answers. It shows the cost of what you seek. It asks you to look beyond the moment, beyond the surface of what you want, and see the consequences of your actions. Every choice, no matter how noble, has its consequences. Jax took a step back, his hands trembling. His vision was clouded with images of devastation, of entire worlds lost, of lives destroyed by the very thing he had hoped would save them. Had he been too hasty? Had he been so blinded by the desire for peace that he had failed to see the dangers? Can I stop it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Vira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out, placing her hand on his shoulder. The warmth of her touch brought him some measure of comfort, but it didn't erase the heavy weight pressing down on his chest. She had shown him the consequences, but there was more to the story. Jax, she said gently, you can't change the past. But you can change the future. The heart's power is not just about destruction. It is also about creation. You have the ability to rebuild, to shape a new path, one that can lead to true peace. But that peace will come at a cost. It will require sacrifice. It will require more than just strength. It will require wisdom, compassion, and the courage to face the unknown. Jax closed his eyes, taking a slow, steadying breath. The weight of the decision, of everything he had witnessed, threatened to crush him, but he knew she was right. Peace wasn't something that could be handed to him. It was something he had to fight for, something he had to build from the rubble of war, from the ashes of destruction. It was the hardest, most painful journey he would ever face, but it was the only one that mattered. I understand, Jax said finally, his voice stronger now. I'll find a way. I'll make it right. Vira nodded. I believe you will. But know this, peace is not a destination. It is a journey. And it is one that will take everything you have. The heart will guide you, but it will not walk the path for you. You must walk it yourself. The vision faded, and Jax found himself back in the cavern, the heart of Vira still glowing before him, its pulse now calm, steady. He felt the power within him, thrumming beneath his skin, but it no longer felt like an overwhelming force. Instead, it felt like a responsibility, a weight he had accepted. Vira stood before him, her expression a mixture of pride and caution. You have chosen, Jax. You will carry the burden of peace. And you will shape the future. But remember, there is no easy way forward. You will face opposition, betrayal, loss. You will have to make difficult decisions. But you are not alone. The galaxy will watch you and some will follow. Jax nodded, his resolve firm. Then I'll lead them. I'll lead both our peoples to a future where peace is possible. A future where we no longer destroy each other, where we build together. Vira's gaze softened. Then go, Jax. The future awaits you. With that, Jax turned, his heart heavy but his mind clear. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but it was one he was ready to face. For peace. For the future. For the galaxy that had already paid so much. And as he walked away from the heart of Vira, he knew that he was no longer just a soldier. He was a leader, a man destined to reshape the future. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.